So I just see one comment there from, sorry, my chat is difficult to manage.
I can read it to you if you like. So there.
Les Hilowitz.
Yeah.
Just about Kenya and South Africa being hubs. This is true. I mean, this is exactly what I'm saying. I mean, we're not disagreeing there. There are hub countries. Singapore is a hub. And I think the last time I spoke in this forum, I showed some photographs of ships going into Singapore, bringing all sorts of things in as a hub for South Asia. There's also a situation when you look at the providers of pesticides in Kenya and Uganda. There's also a tendency for companies to start up that have very direct links. So they're Kenyan companies or Ugandan companies that have direct links, particularly with India. We've seen this as well happening. Yeah. So the product is coming, all the product is coming from India to these companies, exclusive, and then these are distributed. But this is part of the distribution system. Yes, they're not being produced in these countries, but you know, I think one of the things that we have to move away from is blaming someone outside your country for what's happening inside. I mean, the legislation inside, the laws inside are to protect its people. That's why I asked this question. You know, do you feel that your government has you at the best interest? You know, or is it more interested in trade? Is it more interested in industry? Is it more interested in gaining finances for itself in terms of taxes, for example? But yes, I agree with you, Les. Just see the next one here. Okay, there's a comment there from Sharika. Indicating that there must be a focus on legislation linked to health. This is very important. There's a very interesting phenomenon at the moment. Very interesting case has come up in Brazil, for example, where in the past pesticide regulation was carried out through the Ministry of Agriculture, but with the power of veto from the Department of Health, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of the Environment. But because of the lack of resources to pesticide registration, very small staff, 50 people working pesticide registration in Brazil with a population of 300 million, the second biggest importer of pesticides in the world, only 50 people were involved. And so there was a delay in the process, yeah? And the government, under pressure from whoever, decided to take the Ministry of Health out of it and take the Ministry of the Environment out of it. And the ultimate decision was made by the Department of Agriculture. So very important that the legislation is in place and the legislation is listening to, the government is listening to the Ministries of Health and the Ministries of the Environment and not taking decisions on the basis of lobbying from industry or lobbying even from agriculture. So a good point there from Sharika.
So there's some specific comments about their legislation in different countries in relation to the question you asked. So you're welcome if you want to comment on any of those.
I'll just answer there. Onesmo, Kenneth Onesmo, that is worried about my conclusion that reducing HHPs has no significant effect on productivity. I think the first thing we have to remember is people, when you ask people, why do farmers use pesticides? Many people will say it's to eliminate pests. That's not actually true. Farmers use pesticides to eliminate their worries. Very often there's no pests at all. They're just worried that there might be pests. And actually this has been something that's been manipulated as well by people who are interested in selling. You know, there has been cases, for example, of media running a story on some pest that the Ministry of the Environment or the Ministry of Agriculture doesn't even see in the fields, but the farmers rush out and spray everywhere. So when you remove HHPs, you must remember, firstly, we go straight into the first thing that could happen is what we call a toxic substitution, or where the farmer is just using another chemical. And there are plenty of chemicals out there that are less harmful that they can go to. And secondly, most pesticide in many, many crops is not needed in the first place. So it should not be surprising at all that removing HHPs from the system has no effect on productivity. Okay.
I don't know if you want to comment also on the poll, because we're gonna move to the next poll. So I don't know if you want to say anything about the first poll. Are you able? Can you see it on your screen?
So I see that the poll is saying, is there sufficient awareness in your country of the health and environmental risks related to HHPs? And the vast majority of people are saying no. So there's not enough awareness. There's a reason for that. Certainly toxicology and impacts of chemicals is not a major agenda for universities or environmental institutes at the moment. It's a bit of a hot potato and people tend to avoid it. So if we're afraid to look into it because there may be consequences down the line, people don't study it. And so most people, it is correct. There's just simply not enough information, particularly on the environmental risks. A little bit better on the health, but of course, with only 13% of countries in Africa maintaining a database on poisoning, you can see that even there, we're very deficient on data. We're even deficient on data on the impacts of pesticides on agricultural productivity. So there's a lack of data in general around pesticides. And now I've lost my chat. Oh, here we go.
Thanks for that. We're going to move on to the second poll, and do encourage people to click on the link, the Mentimeter link that's in the chat. And Finbarr, there's a lot of comments going through, so go ahead and see what you'd like to respond to.
So somebody there has asked for elaboration about abamectin and cypermethrin. And I think probably related to this resurgence in pests. This is a phenomenon that's very well understood. Basically, organisms that are under stress, to overcome the stress, they will often turn on genetic mechanisms that allow them to reproduce faster, grow faster, etc. And so research has looked at how these products and many, many others affect pests. There are two things. One is what we call a physiological response, or a physiological, well, it's a response, yeah. And the other is ecological. So ecological is kind of easy to understand. Pesticides are killing their natural enemies, and with no natural enemies, the pest can increase in numbers. But the physiological one is often overlooked, and the physiological response is that the pesticides, and this is well documented, make the plant more attractive to the insects or accelerate the growth and reproduction of the insects, and it causes the insects to the population to grow. So what you would see there is that if you get both together, you get the populations of insects increasing rapidly, and the predators and parasitoids gone from the system, and so you get this exponential growth and huge damage. And abamectin and cypermethrin were linked to this, and cypermethrin has been linked actually to other pest resurgence as well, including stem borers in rice. Oof. Andrew Bayek, that's a very long comment. I'll get back to you next week when I finish reading it. It's very long. Okay. So yeah, just mentioning there that Canada has taken measures, I guess, to increase biopesticide availability and use, and is not a producer or exporter of pesticides, and that's probably correct. This is when we talk about, so one of the things that keeps coming up is alternatives to pesticides, and an alternative to HHPs. And there are really three levels that we look at alternatives. The one we really want to avoid is just the one-for-one substitution. You take out one thing from the system, replace it with another. However, in the case of biopesticides, if you have some good biopesticides, which include microbials and other things, then that is a very valid way to reduce the use of HHPs. There's also one thing that we try to do is break what's called the structural and technological lock-in to pesticides. I think Canada hasn't been great in this one particularly, in some areas, specifically the technological lock-in. But this means basically that countries create an environment for research into other possibilities, biopesticides included, and formulate legislation that promotes safer alternatives to pesticides. And the structural goes down to things like, again, universities and institutes and where the research funding is going. And there is still there's a tremendous lack of funding into alternatives for pesticides. And then, of course, the other thing that we say, the alternative to many pesticides is just don't apply anything, because 80% of pesticide use in some crops is just useless and a waste of money and a waste of resources.
You want to say anything about the current poll responses before we move on to the next one?
Okay, so I see here the responses are clear. Pesticide use in your country has increased over the last 10 years. I showed data from 3 regions: Central America, South Asia, and East Africa. And you can see this tremendous increase there. It's actually much more than 50%. It's about 300% increase in some countries. As in the last 10 years, it might be less because it started in the 2000s. There's a feeling among some people from some countries that have better legislation that somehow things have changed and things are going down. That might explain. A few people have said that there's reductions in pesticide use. In general, if we look at the data, that's not even that common. Even in Europe, where there's major efforts to try and reduce pesticide use, it has increased since the 2000s. It has increased dramatically in the last 20 years. In the last 10 years, perhaps it's leveled off, but it hasn't declined. So most people, I think, are correct there.
Thank you. We'll move on to the last poll for this session, and we have a few more minutes left for responding to question 1, as well as any comments you have. So really, question 1 was looking at, do you think that your best interest as an individual, so not necessarily the sector that you're representing, are a priority in the current pesticide legislation in your country?
Okay, I just see a comment there from Susan Hoffman. In current environmental impact assessments for pesticides in the EU do not prevent the approval of pesticides that have harmful effects. I think one thing that must be remembered too is that even biopesticides have harmful effects on the environment. So when I talked there about resurgence, for example, I mentioned there was two contributing factors. One is physiological, the other is ecological, because you wipe out the natural enemies. Many biopesticides, and I'm talking mainly about botanicals, for example, that some farmers are actually making themselves. Neem, for example, even these upset the natural system, the natural regulation system. So chemicals by their nature, agrochemicals and pesticides, they are designed to kill something. They're always toxic to something, and there'll always be some non-target organism that's also affected by these chemicals. So, I mean, definitely the main thing that we can do to reduce toxicity of agriculture and toxicity of our own environment is to reduce overall pesticide use, which, as you can see, I mean, the data there, getting back to, I forget the name of the participant who mentioned this, but you know, talking about increasing pesticide use and is there any link to productivity? We haven't seen a link with productivity. If you take the data on pesticide use plus fertilizer use plus improvements in crop varieties plus mechanization and all the other things, you put them all together and you try and work out which ones are most responsible for variability in crop production. Pesticides are very low on the list. It's mainly fertilizer, actually. So the main approach is, yes, we need to get people away from using pesticides and particularly get them away from prophylactic pesticide use, which goes entirely against IPM principles. So yes, I agree with Susanna there. And will I just look at the last poll then? Oh, that's the same poll.
No, this one's focusing specifically on HHPs. So there is a bit of a different response. I can't quite tell if the same amount of people have responded, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, in this one, I guess there is good news. I mean, the good news is that, yes, HHP use has gone down. Many countries have been very active in removing HHPs from their lists of registered pesticides. The private sector has been helpful in moving towards an agricultural sector that's free of HHPs, and particularly many of the most damaging ones. There is concern, and people know about the consequences because these products have been around for 60 years, some of them. So there has been a decline in many countries in the use of HHPs, and I showed you as well the data there, which is data coming from governments in terms of imports of HHPs into those 3 regions that I looked at, and they have been declining. But there's still work to go. There's still a need to reduce HHPs. There's still, I mean, you would have seen, for example, this terrible story of this village in Nigeria where over 270 people died from endosulfan contaminated water. We still have problems there with products that have been banned and are still there at the back shelf on request if a farmer wants to use them. So there are many problems remaining to be solved. These are still the most damaging pesticides out there, and most of the problems in general related to pesticides are coming from these HHPs. So
thank you very much, Finbarr. Oh, sorry, did you want to say
no,
one
I would
last
say
thing?
just so I guess really it depends where you're from, but I don't think anybody's wrong on that question. Some countries, yes, there's been a decline in use, and that's great. Some countries, perhaps we have seen, for example, Bangladesh, for some reason, in the last 5 years, actually increased their imports of HHPs. Okay, so it depends on your country, and it's been going both ways. Okay.
Thank you. So thank you very much. And that's a good note to end on and move into our second question and our second presenter on really looking at a case study. And I think, Finbarr, you've raised a lot of issues and have given us very good feedback. You can continue to type in the chat if you'd like to respond to any other comments, particularly long ones. But I'm now going to hand over to Dorah from Agenda. So Dorah, please unmute yourself and take us through a case study specifically related to HHPs in Tanzania. And thank you for joining us, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Andreas. I'm Dorah Swai. I work with the NGO named Agenda. And with the NGO, I've been working much on the pesticide management issues for quite some time, over 10 years now. Agenda is also a member of IPEN, that is the International Pollutants Elimination Network. And with them, we have worked a lot on HHPs issues in Tanzania and also around the other countries in Africa. For today, I'm going to speak about what we've been doing, we as Agenda in Tanzania, regarding the effort to phase out HHPs in Tanzania. Next slide, please. Yeah. As some of you may know, pesticide management has been part of our work even before 2015, when SciCam International ICCM4 noted HHPs to be an issue of international concern. Even before that, we were working on pesticide management, but by that time, it was when HHPs were said to be an issue, and the need to phase them out was raised. And fortunately, in 2018, Agenda worked with the stakeholders in Tanzania and identified a list of HHPs which were registered in Tanzania. What we did was to review the list of registered plant protection substances. And from that list, we noted what was HHP and what was not HHP. We prepared the list. We shared the list with the Tanzania Plant Health and Pesticide Authority for them to know what is happening and for them to know how many HHPs were in Tanzania. And of course, for the purpose of pushing them to phase them out. Again, in 2021, we did some work to see in Tanzania how farmers are working in the field in regard to the pesticides use. Some farmers had gone to the extent that they are no longer using these conventional chemicals. They were using the herbal ones, and some were not even using any pesticide. They were using ecological means to produce their products. With this 2021 study, our main aim was to see how alternatives work. Is it really possible to have production with alternative ways of producing without using the conventional pesticide? Next, please. And again, in 2023, Agenda, as part of its advocacy work, Agenda again approached the policymakers, including the Tanzania Plant Health and Pesticide Authority, to push them again to phase out the HHPs from Tanzania. And the good thing is if one gets the opportunity, one can visit the website of the TPHPA, and on the website you will find what is called the first list. They have made some lists. The TPHPA have made a list of what they consider to be HHPs within their register of pesticides, and on their website there is now a list of 20 HHPs, but the list is there on their website with no explanation. Now one will ask, are those 20 banned? Are those 20 just for information purposes? Why are they there? But to us, that's a step, because initially nothing was there. To identify those HHPs, which we identified in our 2 studies, we based on the International Code of Conduct on Pesticide Management and on Pan-International List of Highly Hazardous Pesticides. On those lists, there are criteria to follow to identify those HHPs. And with that, in 2020 again, for us, we identified more than 44 HHPs, but the TPHPA, in their next step, after having those 21s on the website, they have identified 44. But for us, we have identified more than 44. The other thing is also when the TPHPA identify the HHP, they also consider what are the alternatives. That means the alternatives are there, and for us, we see no reason why we should continue relying on using of HHPs if the alternatives are there. Next slide, please. Yes, I've spoken about this, but maybe I should just clarify that so far what we are aware of is that they have now 3 phases of identification where altogether they've identified the 44 HHPs. We understand, and they have been claiming that they will be phasing them out gradually, and we acknowledge that because it's a challenge, you cannot phase them out at once. Some process has to be undertaken. Maybe a kind of action plan or work plan could be set up so that we know, and everybody knows, because we are interested parties, so that we know when they will phase out what. On the other part, on the awareness part, we have noted that also there is low awareness among the public, even among the other players, even with the distributors of the pesticides. Awareness about the HHPs is low. For that matter, we've been raising awareness, and there is a link, you may find it on the chat, a link of the newspaper article where Agenda was urging the government to control and make public hazardous pesticides. Because despite what is on the website, I don't know if there is any other information that from the government that tells us what is going on about the HHPs. So we on the NGO side, we've been raising awareness from time to time, not only once. We have been using also the social media platforms to inform the public, the general public about the HHPs. But again, that is difficult because even if we inform them, the definition, the names of the HHPs, which are supposed to be banned, we still don't have them. Next slide, please. Next. Now, the challenges we have come across, which we think maybe a few, depending on your work situation, depending on what you know already or you have we have come across with, we think there are more than the challenges I've just listed here. The first one is I've talked about it a bit, is there is a list we stakeholders, some of the stakeholders know, but who else know about that list? Who knows pesticides? Who knows which pesticide is HHP? And if this information is not public, it's difficult for other players to act or to support the government actions in reducing the HHPs in the country. A normal farmer or a distributor, if you tell her or him to reduce HHP or to about what is HHP, no one will tell you. They really don't know. And similarly, there is lack of information on HHPs, even to policymakers, to importers, to manufacturers. Although in Tanzania we don't have manufacturers of pesticide, but we have sellers and users and the general public. They don't have much information about HHPs. And HHPs are still registered. Some registrants do not know which ingredients are HHPs. Even if you visit them in their stores or at their outlets, shopping centers, on the shelf there will be many, many pesticides. But if you ask him or her, what is HHP among those you are selling? They will tell you, we don't know. And sometimes there is what we call confidentiality business information that hinder availability of data to decision makers, even to other people who are interested in working on HHPs. Those with those information, they don't share easily. And with low research and registration of alternatives, it is not expected HHPs to be reduced because the effort on the research and on the registration of alternatives is much, much low compared to the effort of research and registration of the conventional pesticides. So that's a big challenge and needs to be addressed by every player so that we together support HHP reduction in the country. Next. This is part of our advocacy work. It was recently in August. Yes. We have been urging the government really to provide conducive environment for availability and use of alternatives to HHPs, because once the government do that, then other players will do their effort to promote alternatives to HHPs. Maybe even those who are working on conventional pesticides may shift to working on the alternatives to HHPs, to promote them and even to produce them. And in the field, for example, even those who are producing the alternatives, for example, from the herbal ones, they are undergoing a lot of work, a lot of hard work to get extracts because they don't have to extract the needed alternative pesticides. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorah. We had sort of from Finbarr, we had the sort of global issues and a global overview of HHPs. And I really liked what you presented in relation to Tanzania, that there are measures and steps being made for countries to start looking at the JMPM criteria and listing and identifying the HHPs, but it's not enough. that there's a lot more that needs to be done. And that really segues very nicely to what the benefits of a global alliance on HHPs would be, to really broaden, as you say, awareness around HHPs, particularly those who are using it, the farmers. So I invite everyone now to move into the chat. I see some of you have already been responding to question 2 in interest of time, so thank you for that. So what are the challenges related to phasing out highly hazardous pesticides in your country, or perhaps the country that you work in? So please do continue to respond to that. Dorah, you're welcome to have a look at the chat if you want to respond to any of the comments that are coming through. You're welcome to verbally, and we're also going to move on to poll 1. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I assume you're able to see the chat. You can just let me know if you need some help. And for those of you who'd like to respond to the question in the poll, what kind of support do you think is needed to phase out HHPs in your country? You can click on the Menti link in the chat, and just please do give your country when you respond. That helps the presenters. Thank you.
I see one of the chat issue for example, in Zambia. I think even that one, they say that the government is still negotiating with the industry for phasing out HHPs. I think even in Tanzania that may be happening because, as I said, already there is a list of 44 HHPs which are supposed to be phased out, but steps for phasing them out is not taking place. Why? I see what Zambia has just put here, that there are negotiations going on with the industry. Probably even in Tanzania, the case may be happening like that. I see the issue of conflict of interest of institutions. Yes, that may be the case sometimes. When such things happen, it's really difficult for one to go ahead with the identification and the phasing out HHPs. What could be done is first resolve on the conflict of interest, and then one can move forward with the HHP phasing out. Thank you for your acknowledgement. Those who are saying acknowledging the presentation, thank you for them. I see some of them on the chat. And the issue from Gabon, lack of public information about HHP, yes. The issue of corruption, the issue of drained resources. I don't know about corruption, but I know there is lack of resources, even in countries like Tanzania. Resources are really limited, and for the HHPs to be made public, or even to be made, people to be made aware of it, there is a need of awareness raising programs, which again are based on resources. Sensitization of the distributors and farmers. Yes, I accept that has to happen, and that's why even with this web Zoom meeting today, I think some of us, we need to go and sensitize farmers, distributors on the effects of HHP, including to ask them to support the national effort of reducing the registration of HHPs. Yeah, someone says you need more communication. Yes, communication is key, is power to information, and I think with right information and with right information at the right time, yes, stakeholders can participate in helping the government phase out HHPs. The important thing with our country is at least they have identified the list. The list is there. I think it would be prudent for the government to move forward to the next step of saying now we have phased out maybe 10 or 20 or maybe more than that, because for us we see no problem of doing that. Or otherwise, they let them come forward with maybe with the constraint they are facing so that stakeholders support them in removing that constraint.
So, Dorah, we are running out of time. We need to move on to the next presenter shortly. And I wondered if you maybe in conclusion would like to respond to any of the responses that you see on the poll. There's been quite a lot of highlighting of the needs for phasing out HHPs. And I think these are really important points to be able to raise further on. But I don't know if you want to comment on any of those.
Yes, altogether what I've noted is the need to enforce, to improve enforcement of our legislations, if it is there, and the need to raise public awareness, especially farmers and the distributors, so that they support the effort of reducing the HHPs. The industry also could support the government by supporting the initiatives of the government of raising awareness of the stakeholders. Yeah.
Thank you, Dorah. And thank you very much for your important presentation. And you can see from the comments that it was well received. The slides will be made available as well as the recording to all participants so that you can re-look at what was said and digest it. We will also be summarizing in a document at the end of the discussion all the presenters' information, and we'll be sharing that with you. We're now going to move on to our third presenter. We did have another poll question, as you can see on the screen. We're unable to respond to that, but we'll try and bring it back if we have time. So I'm going to hand over now to Tadesse. So Tadesse, thank you again for making time to really now build on what was said by the previous two presenters and give us the strong reasons for why we need a global alliance. Over to you, Tadesse. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. My name is Tadesse Amera. I'm the Executive Director of PAN-Ethiopia and one of the two co-chairs of IPEN. And recently, I'm also co-coordinating PAN International. By background, I'm environmental health professional, public health, environmental communication with special emphasis on pesticides issues, working mainly on integrated pest management and also organic agriculture. Next slide, please. So the benefit of a global alliance to phase out HHPs, I will give you the background of the global alliance. But when we come to HHPs, highly hazardous pesticides, these are not, the term is not new. And this highly hazardous pesticide term is defined by FAO and WHO, the JMPM. JMPM is a joint meeting of pesticide management of the FAO and WHO panel. It's well defined as the pesticides that present particularly high level of acute or chronic hazards to health and environment, and that also cause severe or reversible harm to health or the environment. And this is agreed by all stakeholders, including the industry, and highly hazardous pesticides are also considered as the main issues of concern in the SAICM process, where all stakeholders, including the pesticide industry, is there. So this concern is coming in every time, and there is always an endeavor to phase out these highly hazardous pesticides through SAICM. There has been a proposal also through JMPM, but it has never been materialized so far. Next slide, please. And the negative impacts, which are really documented with highly hazardous pesticides, are they cause adverse social, environmental, and human health impacts. These social, environmental, and human health impacts are affecting all the producers, and with this, there is an evidence that it is a major public health concern. WHO and UNEP said exposure to highly hazardous pesticides is a major public health concern. How? About 385 million cases of non-fatal unintentional pesticide poisoning is happening, and also approximately 11,000 fatalities occur every year. These are not numbers. 11,000 fatalities are not numbers. These are humans, human beings, mainly farmers. And 1 to 2 million cases of self-poisoning occur annually, resulting in approximately 168,000 deaths. And these are also humans, human faces, family members, not numbers. So the argument that we have is, when we are saying reducing, is it reducing numbers? Reducing numbers is not the case when people are dying. So these are fatalities that are occurring, affecting producers, affecting food production, food security, and also affecting food safety, which I will discuss in the coming slide. Next, please. And considering this, the Africa region at the SAICM IP 4.2 in Nairobi proposed a resolution to be issued by ICCM5 for a global alliance to achieve a global phase out of highly hazardous pesticides and the adoption of more sustainable alternatives. The background with this is, in the SAICM process, there was a global alliance to phase out, to eliminate lead in paint, which was led by the US EPA, WHO, and UNEP. And this was a very effective process, which resulted in many legislations coming out in developing countries to eliminate lead in paint. So why don't we use that process also to establish a global alliance to phase out HHPs? This global alliance is not a request to eliminate HHPs today. We are requesting a platform that discusses on the phasing out of highly hazardous pesticides. So this is a platform to discuss. There has never been a standalone platform which discusses on the phasing out of HHPs, where the literature and science and evidences show that there are lots of fatalities worldwide. The proposal was fully supported in Nairobi by many countries in the global south, and the industry didn't oppose this proposal. So this was also taken by the African region to the recently convened AMSEN, the African Ministerial Conference on Environment in Addis Ababa, and AMSEN, the African ministers, also endorsed this and they sent a message to ICCM5 to respect the African priorities. When we say African priorities, it is 54 countries. And these 54 countries request the phasing out of highly hazardous pesticides. To have a standalone platform to discuss the phasing out of highly hazardous pesticides. So this message is going to be conveyed to ICCM5 for ICCM5 to issue the resolution on the phasing out of HHPs that discusses through the Global Alliance. Next, please. And what are the benefits if we phase out HHPs? Finbarr earlier said that there is no tangible data that shows the food production loss because of stopping HHPs. But if we phase out HHPs, we are saving farmers in low and middle income countries who are food producers. And when we are talking about food production, food security, if we don't save our farmers, our producers, we are losing food security. Without farmers, we don't have food. So these are linked with food security and also with food safety. Next to saving farmers is also protecting the environment. When we are saying protecting the environment, we are protecting biodiversity and pollinators. Without pollinators, there is no food. Majority of the food we get are obtained through pollination. And phasing out HHPs means saving pollinators, and this also goes with food production and also with food security. And the final one is food safety with HHPs. If we use HHPs, which is not always discussed, but it comes to our tables as well as a residue. And the food safety in the north, if there are foods that are exported from developing countries, if there is a trace of HHPs, they are always banned from importing. But we are producing with these HHPs, and this comes to our table, and we don't have food safety. Even if this is considered as a luxury in low and middle income countries, it is also directly connected with food safety. So phasing out HHPs means having food safety and food security. Next, please. So for the sake of time, the main message is we have to support the African proposal on the resolution at ICCM5 for the Global Alliance to phase out HHPs. So we call upon stakeholders, industry, governments, civil society organizations, IOMC, and everyone, the private sector, to support this Global Alliance to phase out HHPs. This is a platform to discuss how we can phase out HHPs. It should not be misquoted as if it says we should stop using pesticides, HHPs today. We are asking a global platform which can discuss and through time to phase out HHPs. And the second one is, in the global north, HHPs are produced, but they are banned. But they are exported to developing countries. This is double standard. We request to stop this double standard. The first action would be HHPs which are banned in producing countries should also be banned in receiving countries, and the production should be stopped. Because producing countries banned these HHPs because they have alternatives. We are also willing to use those alternatives. And the final one, for the sake of time, is the Global Alliance to eliminate lead in paint was very successful because it was championed by US EPA. So we call upon governments in the north to champion and support the Global Alliance to phase out HHPs. And this call is from 54 countries in Africa. And this is not also a problem of Africa. It's a problem of low and middle income countries in Latin America and in Asia, which also supported at IP 4.2 to phase out HHPs. So this means saving lives and promoting food security and food safety. So we call upon also governments from the global north to support this, to champion this, so that the envisaged food safety and food security can also happen in all the global citizens and the citizens in low and middle income countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tadesse. I think you make very strong points for the need for a global alliance and building on the previous two presentations very well. Thank you for that. And you raise very key points. So we have posted in the chat that for the last question of this pesticide discussion forum, we'd like you to look at perhaps what you think are the key benefits of having a global alliance on phasing out HHPs. And I can see there already are some comments in the chat. So Tadesse, I invite you to look at those. We are going to move on to the first poll because of time. Thank you for that. So just remember, you can click on the Menti link in the chat, or you can always go to menti.com and put in the code on the screen. So Tadesse, I hand back the mic to you if you want to comment to what you're seeing in the chat.
Most of the reflections that I see are just supporting and reflecting on the issues of HHPs, the impacts of HHPs, and also supporting the Global Alliance. If I miss any questions that's burning, I would like to have that support. Otherwise, what I see is all support and reflection on the need for global alliance. So there are some discussions also on the alternatives. As I said, the first action could be in the global north where HHPs are produced but banned. There are alternatives, and these alternatives can also be used. And also from our experience in the global south, we have lots of alternatives for HHPs. And in Ethiopia, for example, PAN-Ethiopia has implementation on organic agriculture in cotton. We replaced even the whole pesticides and agrochemicals, leave alone HHPs. And in the central Rift Valley area of Ethiopia, we replaced alternatives to HHPs, and we cut by 80% on the use of HHPs in vegetables. So these are some of the experiences we have from Tanzania and also from other parts of the world. We have alternatives, and this should be promoted so that these HHPs can also be replaced in different parts of the low and middle income countries, so that we can save our farmers. I see the benefits from Vera. Reflection also on the hazard and risk aspect. The main thing also that I would like to reflect from Finbarr's question, the that was reflected is the promotion on pesticides and especially HHPs goes high, and the alternatives and the impacts is very low, and there is no promotion and there is no any awareness creation mechanism. And that's why the answer in Finbarr's question was the majority was no. There is no knowledge on the impact of HHPs in many countries. So what we should do is also to have that awareness creation mechanism to farmers and also to governments and to policymakers, so that they know that there are high impacts, high negative impacts of HHPs, and there is also an alternative and many alternatives to replace HHPs. These are some of the things that we should also work in tandem with all stakeholders. So the policy should be the one that we can also encourage. And for this policy, there should be a global lead, That global lead will be the establishment of this global alliance. And the draft resolution that Africa presented is in this global alliance, which is going to be led by a volunteer government, but from IOMC, FAO will be the lead because HHPs are linked to agriculture, and WHO will be part because HHPs have health impacts, and UNEP will be part because HHPs have impact on environment, and ILO will also be part because HHPs cause occupational health hazard. So the labor sector is also highly affected. So these four IOMC organizations will work together with the lead of FAO and the government, one government or a couple of governments or multiple governments will champion this so that this platform can be created, and through time, alternatives will come and phasing out will occur and will happen.
Thanks for that. So we're running out of time, so we'll come back to the poll. Just what was indicated is really the key benefit was the redistribution of the risks, if I read that correctly. So let's just quickly have a look at some examples of mechanisms that the Global Alliance could use to ensure that benefits are achieved in all countries. And perhaps while people are responding to that, Natasha, are you able to quickly go back to the previous one so that Tadesse can look at it? I'm assuming people can still respond. So I don't know if you want to, if you want to have a quick look at that, Tadesse.
Yeah, I see for this, what would be the main benefits of a resolution at ICM5 for developing a global alliance. I see reducing negative health effects on HHPs, reducing negative environmental impacts, prevent redistribution of banned products, and also supporting countries with weak legislation, reducing burden. There is only one which was not elaborated. So these are the main ones. And as we see from this poll, there is a very good recollection of the benefits, but this is also reflected as something which should be supported by legislation and regulation. So this is a very good poll that I see from the reflections.
Thank you. So I'm going to leave this poll up and let people continue commenting. We only have a few minutes left. So Tadesse, do you want to make any last comment before I start closing this session?
Yeah, my last comment is, dear participants, I know most of you are coming to Bonn for ICCM 5, and your governments, ministers, and also focal points are coming. So from this platform, I would like to request you to make your delegates aware of this process and to support the resolution on the Global Alliance to phase out HHPs, and also to support the African position on the targets on HHPs. There are targets which are indicated in the main document and which are going to be discussed at IP 4.3 on HHPs. So these targets should be supported by all stakeholders so that we can have a tangible move at ICCM 5. It should not be diluted, and it should be ambitious so that we can save our producers, our farmers from impacts of HHPs. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tadesse, and thanks for those very strong final points. And I'm hoping that everyone will respond to your call for action. So I'd like to say thank you very much to our three presenters, to Finbarr, Dorah, and Tadesse, who really have presented a lot of important information about HHPs and about the need for a global alliance. As I said, we will send out a digest with a summary, and we hope to send this out before ICCM 5, so you can carry it with you in your pocket as you go and discuss with others about HHPs at ICCM 5. I'd like to thank Natasha in the background for the technical support, and Eunice, and Naomi, who have made sure that we've had a smooth running discussion. I'll also ask if you have any particular topics you would like us to discuss in future discussions, you can always put those in the chat. Thank you to all of you who participated. We had up to 80 people at one stage, and you have provided very good feedback and information and really allowed us to have this opportunity to have an engagement with different stakeholders from different stakeholder groups. So it's really important for us to listen to each other's voices and to be able to work together really for a pollution-free environment and to really protect the most vulnerable population. That's why we're having these discussions. It's very important. So we will post in the chat when the next discussion is. And if you haven't joined the WhatsApp group, please do so. You will get announcements there. You'll also get the digest. We have a newsletter that we put out every few weeks with resources, and we encourage you to sign up for that as well. So thanks again to everyone. And I look forward to meeting many of you in Bonn at ICCM 5. Bye for now. And please do take a moment to fill in the evaluation, which should be popping up on your screen. Thank you.